welcome to the Advisory Cloud podcast. Today we're joined by Bob Pulver, a renowned transformation leader and strategist with a real stellar track record at giants like IBM, NBC Universal. Bob has seamlessly merged technology and talent, having pivoted to the startup realm as a talent technology pioneer. And he's known for his empathetic communication and innovative mindset. His expertise spans from digital transformation to artificial intelligence, which we're going to be sure to talk about in a bit. He's a real catalyst for innovation, and he's here to share some of his insights on optimizing human potential in the evolving workplace. So, Bob, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And I'm Chris Beaver, co-founder of Advisory Cloud, host of the Advisory Cloud podcast. If you don't know about Advisory Cloud, go check us out. We help executives and advisors connect in ways to help them solve problems and drive their businesses forward. We made over 10,000 connections in the last year alone. And whether you're looking for guidance in your role or reached a point in your career where you're ready to add advisory work to your resume, you can get started for free at Advisory Cloud. So, Bob, I know there are a number of topics that we want to get to today, but let's start with your current work. Talk to us a little bit about this idea of nonlinear career paths and how to work towards roles that are fulfilling. I know this is something that you've spoken about. So talk to us about what nonlinear career paths mean to you and the benefits that you've seen come from them.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly when I was coming out of college, which was a while ago, the traditional sort of guidance that you would get from a career standpoint is, pick a lane, right? And define your major and maybe even a minor or a secondary, sort of topic that you're really interested in and you thought you could excel in based on your skills and knowledge and your interests. And I was not one of those people who really knew what I wanted to do, certainly not in high school and even in college. I just felt like there were so many things that were of interest to me and really it was a matter of, exploring, I suppose. And so I didn't go straight from college, into, a 9-to-5 job, but after a year and a half of doing various other things, it was time to, sort of find some structure. And so when I started working at IBM in my, early to mid 20s, it just seemed like this is great because even if I don't like my first role there, it's an enormous company and, I'll probably get exposed to a lot of different things. So as long as I do a good job and, seem like a good, collaborator or whatever, there would be all of these different sort of avenues. And so, part of it was following my instinct, but also the advice of, my leadership team and things like that. And I just started finding, even within a couple of years, I started finding like what we would now call like an inside gig, right? I would find an opportunity to even relocate temporarily to, another location, which actually brought me from Atlanta up the East Coast to New Jersey, and then did some remote jobs and things like that. But I had probably 15 jobs in my 22 years at IBM because I was constantly looking for sort of related areas and things that I got exposed to in one job and said, well, I could actually go, if I wanted to, I could go deeper in this. And just between the internal sort of networking and the relationships that I built and the interest that I had, it just seemed like, long term, I did try to think about, well, what would this lead to, right? So try to think a couple steps ahead of where this is going and said, where would this position me in the next, over the next couple of years? And I think what's interesting is some of those roles I was completely oblivious to until I was sort of closer to the point at which, I did want to go in that direction. So I think that gave me a lot of exposure to different aspects of the business. Some of the advice I always got from early, mentors in my career was know your business. Don't just preside over it or preside over your little, specialty area. And so it just seemed like, some people call it nonlinear, some people call it a lattice as opposed to ladder career, kind of like that term, a lattice, but have to explain it to a lot of people, so I don't always use it. But I just think it's the exposure that I've gotten across people, process, technology, across different types of experience design work, whether it's for a candidate or an employee, a hiring manager, et cetera. Always working on projects that allowed me to collaborate with different lines of business. At IBM, it was IBM Research, it was consulting, it was market intelligence. And so those connections allowed me to actually go and play a role in each of those, organizations. So I just think you don't know what doors are even on the other side of, one of these sort of, assignments. So I don't blame, people earlier in their career for not having the tenures that, we used to have in the workplace.
Right. Absolutely. No, and it's interesting going back to one of the first things that you'd said there in terms of, you were in high school, you were in college, you didn't know, what you wanted to do with your life. And I think that's something that, a lot of people even after college and, you mentioned, you choose your major and you choose a minor that, some topics that are of interest to you. And, personally, my personal experience, I was a music major, and a film and media studies minor. And so at that point in college, I was looking at my options and saying, well, I like music. I've been playing music for a while, and, they actually had the least number of required courses for my music major than any other major at the school. So it was great because I could go take a poetry class, or I could take a business class or an econ class, in addition, whereas a lot of people that were, in some of those stricter majors, if you will, that had more requirements didn't have the ability to poke around and jump around and try out some different topics and really see. So, can definitely relate to that in terms of, being 18, even being 20, 22, and not being quite sure what you want to do yet.
Right.
So I think that makes sense to, whether you've entered the career realm or even, you're beyond that, just keeping those options open, and following, as you did at IBM, following those threads of interest and what excites you. And like you said, you don't know what's going to be on the other side of some of those doors. So I think that's great. And then, next up, just kind of, moving through there, obviously you've worked in a number of different roles, different areas, and helping to implement emerging technologies over the years, to really help companies move forward, get acquainted with new technologies, get those implemented. And I know you've been doing a lot of work around AI recently. It's, obviously a very hot topic, and everybody seems to have their own take on how it should be implemented and what that's going to look like. Talk to us a little bit about your vision for AI in the workplace and how you see it going with the companies that you're working with and even other companies.
Yeah, for sure. So, I was always intrigued by some of this emerging technology. The one role that I had at IBM that I stuck with for more than a couple of years was basically connecting some of IBM's biggest clients to IBM Research. So, certainly there were plenty of things that our regular, sort of salespeople could sell them in different areas, including, analytics and collaboration software and things like that. But what I loved about that role and why I stuck around for so long was because there was so much innovation, so much invention that I was helping to expose clients to that they just wouldn't have found elsewhere. In fact, some of that was things that didn't even have, patents yet. I mean, IBM was huge on patents, but some of these ideas and some of these proposals needed to be proven to see if they had commercial, viability. And so some of that was about identifying people that were willing to experiment with us and sort of co-develop some of these solutions. Some of the technology that came out of the lab while I was there were the predecessors to Watson, what became IBM Watson. So there were research projects that were combined to basically bring together all this logic. Some of that, of course, was for its first Jeopardy appearance, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. Right. I actually had the mock Jeopardy studio in my office.
Oh, wow.
So I watched it being trained. I watched, C-level executives get up there and try to, compete against Watson. And so that was some really early exposure to how AI is trying to, sort of mimic, human decision-making, trying to, aggregate and assimilate all this information from disparate data sources and come up with confidence scores of its answers and things like that. So they called it deep QA, or deep question answering. And that was, how do you train it to understand this general, knowledge about all these different subjects and be able to respond. And so that's similar, of course, to what we see today with some of the generative AI, chatbots like ChatGPT. And but it really got me intrigued about where we take this, not to necessarily sort of outsource human decision making to AI, but using it as I like the term that a lot of companies are using now called co-pilot,
right.
because it really emphasizes that you are still the pilot, right? You are still in control, and this is augmenting the work that you do. And so, without getting into terminology debates, some of that is really just basic or more basic rules-based automation.
Okay.
But when you get to how more advanced, logic based on machine learning and these large language models, you really start to see the power that it brings, and start to take on more of we thought of as innately human kind of tasks in terms of our cognitive ability. So right now my focus is specifically on how do we do this responsibly within an organization, and even more specific within human resources as it relates to talent. So how do we make sure that we understand and are assessing talent for their actual potential to succeed in a role, but also keeping in mind that you've got to sort of look at the trajectory of someone's sort of career growth in concert with the trajectory of how AI is evolving to take on
how
more
those
and
roles
more
may be different
use cases
in 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. So how does that sort of human plus AI sort of symbiosis evolve such that we still have meaning in our work, we still get to apply our creativity and our intuition, and some of the things that are going to connect dots that it may not otherwise connect, and let AI do the things that it's best at. So watching that evolution, I think, is critically important, and also how organizations really think about the responsibility and ethics and trustworthiness and fairness of some of these models, and the data. You need to have quality data to do that. Otherwise, as we've seen, you get hallucinations and other kinds of things that are very misleading to people who are just putting trust in these tools. I mean, we are not yet at the point, AI is not yet at the point where it can be trusted like a calculator, right? You really have to know that its source data is trustworthy, that the algorithms that take all that data and put different weights and just different attributes, that's trustworthy as well. It's not creating adverse impact against people from a bias and discrimination standpoint. So that's really the focus for me on the AI front within HR. Obviously, there's other use cases for AI across the HR domain and beyond, but that's a critical focus right now with new legislation coming and proposed, not just in the U.S. but around the world.
Right. And then in terms of that, obviously, being someone that's working with AI, thinking about AI in these areas, I know you've written that you believe that it's really the right combination, and you spoke to this a moment ago. It's the right combination of human ingenuity as well as responsible AI that can really help optimize decision making to solve some of those really complex challenges. And whether this is in your organization currently or just thinking more broadly, but what are some of the areas that you really feel that AI and human ingenuity working together can help solve some challenges, and maybe that's specific to HR and kind of that role, or talk us through some of the opportunities that you see there.
Well, I think one of the things we need to understand is there's a lot of discussion and thought leadership that's been put out around this concept of a skills-based organization, skills-based hiring, skills intelligence, and there's everyone's trying to figure out how to structure it. Well, what if do we need our own taxonomy first? Do we need to inventory all our skills first, or all of these things? And I think one thing, and I'm not going to tell you which way is best. I think you need to understand that different. If you're a hiring manager, you need to understand that different roles and different titles at different companies could actually have different levels of knowledge and skill on in different topics. So you can't make any assumptions there. But the other thing is, when you look at what skills you might need in the future, or the skills gaps try to identify the skills gaps that you have, and then say, okay, we need to go out and find these people, or maybe through internal mobility and talent marketplaces, those kinds of things, you could potentially uncover that you've got some of those skills within your organization already, just not, in the roles that you thought. I think it's important to keep in mind, I mentioned this before, like the trajectory of AI and what skills, when we talk about, well, we've got this skills gap. Well, what is that, the actual sort of half-life of a skill or a skills gap? If you know that AI is coming and it's going to, and you can project that, it's probably going to take on, if it can do this now, it can probably, learn this, going forward. We could do the same thing with humans, right? Like if you, this concept of skills adjacency, like if someone that can write in, Python could probably learn, these other, coding languages, or in 3 months, 6 months or whatever. So are you going to actually reject the candidate because they don't have the exact skill that you need, even though they could have it in, 2 or 3 months or whatever it is. So we've got to look at those intersections and try to forecast and incorporate, the trajectory of AI capabilities in conjunction with, the skills that you think you might need. So I think that's one area that is critically important. I think the ethics behind how we use AI for different decisions is a very important and broad-reaching topic, because this isn't just about hiring decisions. It's about approving people for a loan. It's about approving people for an insurance, policy, and all these things get embedded. And if you have models that are, biased themselves, or they're using biased, training data, it has those ripple effects that say, okay, now everyone who falls into this, demographic, or is in this, however you've assigned, or your actuaries have assigned, sort of a risk level for different profiles, it's going to have a huge, downstream impact. So I think there's responsibility on the people who are using the technology, but certainly the folks who are building, some of these capabilities need to do so in a responsible way. So just like we want everyone to think about privacy and cybersecurity by design, you need to think about, the, beyond data privacy, but what are the implications of, that data getting propagated in all these other systems. And so we see that today with even the large language models and the interaction where you're getting, either misinformation or disinformation because of just somebody. You can't assume that everyone's, doing things, in the most ethical way. So you need safeguards, and you need, audits and different things. But if you can do that, and you can give people the confidence that, this has been built by design, as the product development team and all those teams are doing, and checking for, bugs in code, you could also check for things that could lead to, bias and discrimination, or, inaccurate output at the other end.
Yeah, and it can be, really tough. I mean, I think people are starting to understand more and more, but still might have trouble grasping the sheer amount of data that is going into the input to build these models, and really making sure that they're going through and eliminating bias, whether that's through anti-bias audits at the beginning of that. And even if you do, you may put a bunch of data in that you feel is not biased, but suddenly you're still, if you're testing once you've built that model, still getting odd results, then obviously, it can be a bit of a black box figuring out exactly how all those data points are working together there. So super important and very tricky in terms of what that's going to look like. But hopefully with the proliferation of these large language models and people recognizing the possibilities there, that the technology will only start to help us solve those issues as well, which is very interesting when you start thinking about models, training models, and models auditing models and things like that.
That's right. Absolutely.
So next up, and I've got to ask you this, obviously we're here on the Advisory Cloud podcast. You are a member of Advisory Cloud. And again, for those of you who don't know about Advisory Cloud, we have over 10,000 advisors like Bob that are looking to advise companies of all sizes on all sorts of topics, and they can help you solve that challenge or take advantage of that new opportunity in your business. So, Bob, first off, what are you looking to gain from adding additional advisory work to your resume, and what types of advisory roles and opportunities you're looking for?
Yeah, no, I've had really good experience so far with Advisory Cloud. I'm advisory board member on quite a few companies on the platform, and so I've been attending some of their board meetings to contribute ideas and thoughts about their approach. So the founders have been very receptive to the feedback that folks are giving, and I like to help people. I know it's not easy as an entrepreneur. It's not easy as a solopreneur and getting things off the ground. It's not. There's a lot of competition in a lot of the spaces that companies are in, and there's just only so much you can absorb. I know that firsthand, and I just feel like that nonlinear path that I've been on and all the exposure that I get, my natural sort of curiosity sometimes takes me in directions that I didn't anticipate spending time. Like even now with the AI, audits and advisory stuff that I do, I did not expect to go too deep in governance and compliance and federal regulations, and I'm just finding it fascinating. But at some point, I've got to cut myself off and draw a line somewhere. But I just feel like the background that I have lends itself well to thinking about different aspects of what it's like to grow a business, whether it's on the sort of social media, and marketing side, or it's my extensive experience with large companies that a lot of these smaller startups are trying to sell into, and I can give a perspective of objections from either a CFO, a CMO, a CIO, that would prevent you from getting the right meetings or progressing some of those deals. Or maybe there's a new market that you hadn't thought about because you've been targeting the primary use case, and logically so, but perhaps there are other avenues or other lines of business, or maybe it's other types of business development and partnerships that you could rely on, and so all that work, starting from IBM's own multi-tiered supply chain through process mapping and automation, all the way through AI. How do you get messages that that are going to resonate, and how can you incorporate technology to sort of modernize your operation, as well as take some of the work off your plate, because there's never enough hours in the day for everyone to do everything they want to get done. So rather than spend the money building up staff, what can you do with automation, and then starts to layer on the human expertise and creativity and innovation on top of that. So I found the platform really valuable. I love contributing to these different areas and learning from them, and hopefully they learn from me as well.
Wonderful. Well, Bob, thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate you joining us. And again, for those of you watching, if you like this video, subscribe to our channel. We publish new interviews every week with leading executives, just like Bob that you saw here today. So again, Bob, thanks so much for your time. It was great learning more about your background, and we look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks much.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.